for so long we've been hearing statements like Africa is rising, and for as long as we've been saying Africa is rising, someone would be hoping that very soon we'll start saying Africa has risen. If you keep rising for a very long time, it's a problem. It's a great thing for a child to be growing, but it gets to some point that we should no longer be saying this person is growing. We should be saying this person has grown. If you understand what I'm saying, we should be saying this person has grown, And so I was just thinking around all these things, and I said, okay, let's have this conversation. The truth of the matter is, if the people in Africa, if the Africans, if the Nigerians, if the Igbo man, the Yoruba man, the South African, don't rise, Africa is never going to rise. That's a clear thing. We'll talk about having strong institutions and strong systems, but there are no strong institutions, no strong systems, no strong anything without people. Without people, human resource is always the number one thing. You can bring all the capital you want to bring, and if you don't have the human resource, you don't have anything. If you don't have the human resource, you don't have anything. I mean, what happens in Nigeria every day is a testament to that. That you need human resource, you need people to make things happen. And so the rise of the African youth is in fact the rise of Africa. And so if we are going to move the conversation forward on the rise of Africa, we should focus so much on the rise of Africans. The rise of Africans. I was discussing with my colleague about how there are a lot of beautiful systems in place in Nigeria, but Nigerians prefer to do things without those structures. A testament to the fact that the structure will not cause people to do anything. So we can make a lot of changes to in our country, but if the people at the center of national development, if the people at the center of this discussion don't change, nothing changes. You cannot have a prosperous nation without prosperous people. It just goes that way. Prosperous people are in fact the people that make prosperous nation. So is there a connection between having faith, being hopeful about your country, and changing the narrative in country per se? Is there a connection between our perception of reality and our realization of a future per se? Okay, is faith, is hopefulness, is optimism just wishful thinking? There are many Nigerians now who feel that any hope or any faith you put in the development of Nigeria is just wishful thinking. Just go ahead, do what is quote unquote. Just be open to the reality. Look at the reality of things and work with that quote unquote reality. And I have to say, I don't like statements like this is the reality. I don't like statements. And the reason I don't like statements like that is because there's really no reality. Every day as we converse, as we go about our activities, we are shaping what we understand as reality. We are shaping what we call reality. We are creating the impression of what we will accept as reality. Yes, sometimes we just use the statement to trade away, but reality is what we make of it. It is not written in stone anyway. Even for machines, inanimate objects that don't have agency per se, there is no reality. You cannot say for cars, for example, and say this is how car works. It's a reality. No, it's how a car has been designed to work. When you communicate it that way, you acknowledge the fact that things can be different. In fact, there's an alternate reality. So when you say the car has been designed this way, you're acknowledging that it could have been designed another way. So if before, maybe pre-2015, you are saying, oh, this is how cars work. You put fuel into them, put on the ignition, the V6, V12 engine kicks off, the fuel burns, and that converts into energy that goes into the wheels. This is the reality. Well, this is 2025. You have electric vehicles that don't receive fuel, that don't receive any gas whatsoever. It's electricity. Okay. And if you go back to uh, the early stages of cars, they used steam engines. The point is, whatever we think to be reality, whatever we think to be the way things are, is simply the way we have made things to be. Okay. It's simply the way that we have designed things to be, simply the way we have enabled things to be, which means that we can disable things, we can change things, we can do things differently. And I think that's a perspective that we can always have in mind. So I'm saying this with respect to reality. So what is the reality in Nigeria? The reality in Nigeria is what we have made it to be. The reality can be different. Okay? The reality can be different. And it's something that we need to know. And again, if I'm talking about Nigeria, I'm talking about Nigerians. Okay? Because for you to have a prosperous nation, you need prosperous people. So everything I'm saying about the prosperous Nigeria, I'm really talking about prosperous Nigerians. And we need to see, I mean, in the larger scale of things of the rise of Africa, is that Nigeria is a very crucial country. If you look at the geopolitics of things, the influence of Nigeria in Western Africa and is very important. It's very important. If we look at most the scale of the economies around Africa, around Nigeria in the West African hemisphere, if you look at the scale of the several industries, the entertainment industry, the oil industry, and other key sectors. You see that Nigeria is leading, but for all its woes and all its deficiencies, it's actually leading in that aspect. So Nigeria is a very pivotal country if you're looking at the geopolitics in Africa. And so Nigeria plays a very big role in the rise of Africa. And again, Africa, I'm talking about African roots. So yeah, so this is reality. The reality is that we shape reality, we create the reality. Every conversation we have every day, everything we do every day contributes to shaping that reality. So is faith just wishful thinking, or is there something more? A while back, I stumbled on what is called the Gallup Hope Index. And what Gallup Hope Index does is that it basically captures people's outlook about their personal future and the nation's prospects. So it captures the population's sense of hope, of well-being, and life evaluation. So if you go to the dictionary, faith has a different definition from hope and has a different definition from optimism. But in all practical sense, faith and hope and optimism are practically the same thing. You can't have faith without hope. You can't have hope without faith. You can't have faith without optimism, and vice versa. Okay, these three things are always present when one is present. Once you have faith, there's hope, there's optimism. Okay, there's positive outlook. So the Gallup Hope Index captures how people think of themselves, of their countries, and what they hope to achieve or hope to get. What the Gallup Hope Index has shown us by research is that when there's increased hope, there's increased motivation and risk taking. This, of course, leads to increased innovation and participation in economic activities. When there's increased hope, there's increased social trust that leads to increased institutional stability. And all this leads to sustainable development. What are they now? The sustainable development goals, beautiful as they are, they don't work without people. And they won't work with pessimistic people still, right? If you bring people who are pessimistic, who don't think that these sustainable development goals are even worth anything in the first place, things will not work. It's just that simple. So while when we are measuring the state of a country, we measure the Human Development Index, we measure several economic indices, we tend not to measure things like hope. But in fact, hope is one of the most important things for you to measure. Okay? The faith, the trust, the belief that people have in something is one of the most important things for you to measure. Okay. If you look at say companies like Tesla or let's scale back with that example. Let me come to Nigeria. Look at something like Piggy Vests, or you look at something like companies like I mentioned Piggy Vests, Money Points, and all of. It is still in the prevalence of poor economic structures, absence of banking infrastructures, a poor middle class. You know, the middle class are not supposed to be poor, but in Nigeria, the middle class is poor. The middle class is supposed to be average, but there's no average. So it's in the midst of all these things that, you see companies like PiggyVest rising, you see companies like Money Point rising, you see companies like Heon Health and the rest of those coming up and shooting out. And these companies did not just shoot out because they looked at the economic indices and it was by all means, they knew that everything was pointing in the right direction. That's not why. Because we all know, quote unquote, the reality. And the economic indices are not very favorable. But regardless of these realities, quote unquote, reality, we still see that there are persons making a difference. We still see that there are persons that are rising. We still see that there are persons who are doing very great things, who are doing very beautiful work. Why is that the case? For anybody who is going to do great work, for any nation that's going to develop, there needs to be hope. It's very important. There needs to be faith. There needs to be a belief that in fact things can work. And uh, just as the Bible says it, faith in many ways is a belief in something that is not clearly materialized, if you want to put it that way, right? You look at all the signs and all the indices, it doesn't make sense, but you believe that somewhere along the line, things are going to work out somewhere. Mo Ibrahim, when he founded Celtel in Africa, Africa was poor. I mean, today we are trying compared to where we were before. We are wealthier than before. Okay, Africa was poor then. There were little to there were no phones across the country. Okay, and telecommunications companies in the Americas, in Europe, they just did not make sense to them that somebody says he wants to open a telecommunication business in Africa. In Africa, you have the issue of language barrier. Most persons don't speak the same language. You have the fact that, I mean, at some point, Mo Ibrahim wrote that they had to use helicopters to carry fuel to go to remote stations where their masts are to make sure that they power those masts. Because roads, we are not there. The roads, we are not there to put these things. The structure, the infrastructure, the everything, nothing. They had to fix those masts by themselves. They had to lay the cables by themselves. They had to, you know, buy the telephones by themselves, and they had to do a lot of things. And so a lot of innovation had to come in to make it possible. But by the time Celtel put his foot on the ground with Africa and began to work, Africans began to actually patronize the service. So why did they prosper regardless? Is it because the economic situation was most favorable? No. It was because they were able to see something where other persons were not able to see. So I would like to challenge our understanding of faith and take it forward. Faith, hope, optimism is not just a belief, it's not just a feeling, it is an action word. Okay? It is what you do. It is how you act, it is how you respond in situations. It is your dream. It is the things you are working forward to. It's the things that you put your disposable income into. So when you have 50,000 naira extra, when you have 100,000 naira extra, what you spend your money on is what you believe. That is what I would like to challenge us to understand faith to be. So if you believe that I can go into business and I can become prosperous from that, you will invest. You will look for a business to go into. If you're not going into any business, you really don't believe that business can make you prosperous, except of course you don't believe that you need to be prosperous. In that case, we can excuse it. But if you believe that you need to be prosperous and you believe that business is a way to make you prosperous, is the way to make you prosperous, then you will invest in business. So faith is an action word. Faith is what you do. Okay? So PiggyVest again is an African company, Nigerian company specifically. Okay, I think most of us should know about PiggyVest. The founders of PiggyVest are all alumni of Covenant University. Okay, how did they start PiggyVest? Um, Sometime in 2020, 2015, yeah. They came across a post on Twitter where a lady was talking about how she has saved about 300,000 people, so thereabouts, with wooden piggy bank. Okay, she has saved about that amount of money with that box, and they were fascinated by that, and they were like, "Wow, if somebody can do this with a box, perhaps there is a way we can uh, even take this further. Create a digital solution, and people will be able to save online. Okay, people will be able to save on a digital wallet over time. And that's how PiggyVest started. Okay, that's how I think it started as Piggy Bank. That's how it started. And now PiggyVest is really a big financial institution that is not just helping people save money, now it's helping people invest, it's helping people invest in naira, in dollar. And so when you look at the idea behind PiggyVest, it was not brought down from the moon. It's not unique. It's not groundbreaking. You don't need to attend Harvard to get the idea. There's really nothing there. It's just a basic idea. But the difference between these persons and the several other persons who could have as well done a piggy vest or a piggy bank is, I would say, is that hope, is that optimism, that positive outlook, that willingness to want to see that things can have a positive outcome. We can talk about everything happening in Nigeria. Like I would say when I'm talking with my friends that we should not disagree on the facts in Nigeria. We should not disagree on that or the facts of anything. But what we make of these facts is now a different conversation. Right? What you make of facts is dependent on whether or not you have hope in that. Okay? Whether or not you have hope is dependent, it will determine what you make of the facts. So, Africa rising. Nigeria, for example, is one of the fastest growing populations in the world, specifically young population. Now, if you are not a hopeful person, one obvious thing to point out is that the economy is bad. The number of people are growing. How are we going to cater for these young persons? How are we going to enable them? You will see the country going further into starvation. You'll see the country going further into there are several disruptions, conflicts here and there. You'll see the country going into further political instability. But there's another outlook to things. Okay, with a growing young population, you have active, agile people who can become active members of the economic system, who can become active contributors into an economic ecosystem. And in fact, one of the reasons why Africa is still being bet on today is that it still has a very young population that can think, that can ideate, that can innovate, that can put themselves to the task and make things work. Okay. And that is one of the reasons why Africa is still in the conversation of developments. And many projections puts Africa to be the next frontier of development, to be the next development hub, the next infrastructure hub, the next economic hub, the place for one to begin to invest in. But interestingly, at the same time, a lot of Nigerians, a lot of Africans are running out of Nigeria. They're running out of Africa. They do not believe that there's anything, worth holding on to in the country. So let's go down. Faith in itself, yes, like I said, is an action word. And it is, in fact, faith, hope, optimism, I would say, is development capital. It's a form of capital. You cannot find a successful person who was not hopeful. You cannot find it's a challenge I'm putting to you. Find a successful person who did not believe in his possibilities to be successful. They can come out and say, oh, I did not imagine that it will get to this point. But they imagined that they will go ahead, that they will actually hit some success. They just did not know. They could not imagine how far they could be successful, but they in fact imagine that they could be successful. You cannot commit yourself to something if you don't believe in it. It's just the facts. It is just the facts. Okay? You cannot put your hard-earned money, you cannot put your Tesla I brought up earlier. At some point, Elon Musk had to put his last saving, his last money into it. And if the company failed, that was it. Not only the company being bankrupt, he as an individual will be bankrupt. Okay, you cannot make such kind of moves if you don't have hope, if you don't believe. So hope is development capital, but I would say that as with all forms of capital, okay, it must be effectively deployed. It must be strategically deployed. Okay, you have to hope in itself does not change things. It is the actions that follow hope that change things, and that's why I say if it's an action word, you have to put action to support uh, your hope. You have to bring your hope alive. It's actions. But just before I go into actions, I'll just talk a bit about about perceiving reality. Okay, and there is a sort of framework that I've been using to conceptualize it for a while now, and it's to see or to have sights, to have insights, and to have vision. Okay, to have sights, to have insights, and to have vision. To have sights is to simply see the fact of the matter. To have insights is to understand the mechanism behind the facts of the matter. To get the explanation behind the fact of the matter. Why are things this way? Okay. So when we walk into this office, it doesn't seem like people are willing to get work done. Everything is slow. The management is not responsive. These are the facts of the matter. You can see it. Insights is that you understand why things are the way they are. There's a very big gap between insights and sights. Let me put it this way. So sights would possibly be um, a young girl running on the road by say 7 p.m. That's sight. You've seen her. She's running on the road by 7 p.m. That's all there is to it. Sight. Fact of the matter. You are asked tomorrow, what did you see? A young girl running across the street by 7 p.m. You saw that. That's good. But insight goes further. Insight says, why is she running on the road by this time? Is she exercising? Is she just jogging? Is somebody chasing her? Is she running away from somebody? Has she done something and you're trying to understand and contextualize what you have seen. If we are unable to have insights, we'll be able to do little. Okay? We'll be able to do little. All we'll be able to do is to see. And we'll hardly have any drive. You can hardly have any drive without insights. You can hardly change anything without insights. You're not rising to anywhere without insights. Okay? Most people and I'm not saying this to be dismissive or to look down on anybody, but most persons uh, just have sights. That's all they have. They just have sights. So they do what everybody's doing. They follow the path everybody's following. They move with the trend. They go where the wind is blowing, and that's what it is. That's all there is to it. Why do you have to do this way? That's what every other person is doing. Why does he have to? That's what everybody else is doing. Sights will take you only so far. Yeah, you can make some results, but if you're going to hit something extraordinary, if you're going to rise, if you're going to be above um, the average, then you have to have insights. You have to understand how things work. Okay, who are the in this office space that I find myself? Who are the key stakeholders? Who are the persons whose opinion have a lot of weights in these environments? Okay, when you understand those kind of social dynamics in your workplace, if you come into that place and you want to effect change and you want to do things differently, you know how to do it. You would know how to do it because you know who to talk to. You know the person's favor to buy. You know the person to impress. Okay. You know the person to keep out of your meeting. You know, if there is somebody that should not be in that meeting for it to move forward, you know who that person should be. And I mean, some persons who are in office would understand what I'm saying. There's some politics, all of those. And it goes beyond just, of course, office, even down to your personal life. Okay. What are the facts of the matter? The fact of the matter is that when I subscribe, do my 15K subscription per month, I spend half of it or 70% of it on TikTok. That's the fact of the matter. But why does it happen that way? You have to now understand what are the factors in my personal life that are driving me in the direction that I am going. Okay. Who are the stakeholders in my life? What are the things in my circle of influence? Who are the people? Who are the books? Who are the mentors? Perhaps my family background. What are the things that are playing to bring me, to make me do the things that I am doing? That is insight. Insight really tries to understand what is happening. So there is sight, there is insight, and then there is vision. Vision is really where hope now comes in. As a matter of fact, the brain has the capacity to create visions, temporal visions, in anticipation of what the eye is about to see. So before the eye sees something, the mind has created a visual map, a vision of what the eyes is about to see. The reason being that there is just a little but significant time difference between when your eye sees something and when your brain perceives and interprets it. So there is a little time lapse there. And of course, without the ability of the brain to forecast the future to an extent, okay, without the brain being able to do that, there will be some lag between what we see and what we do. There will be a little bit of a lag. So what the brain does is that it anticipates based on observation of things. You see, it sees, for example, there's a vehicle moving. Okay. Your mind maps that in the next 0.005 milliseconds, this car is going to be in this particular location. And you respond before the car gets to that location. Okay. So even in our normal biological wiring, we are wired. The point is we are wired to see the future. Okay. We are wired to anticipate the future. We are wired to create an image of what that future can look like. So you have seen the facts of the matter inputs. You have understood the different factors that are playing out. Now, what are you going to make of this information that's in hand? What are you going to make of it? There is one guy that's going to say, these people are giants. If we go there, they are going to kill us. It's true that they are giants. And it's true that they can kill you. Then there is another guy that says, these people are giants, but we can take them down. It's also true. Sometimes the opposite of truth is not lie. Sometimes the opposite of truth is another truth. And so having vision is challenging yourself to see a positive outcome. Okay? To have a positive outcome, a positive outlook to things. I have seen all these things that are playing out. I have understood how things play out. And I believe that things can turn out differently. Now, insight is very important because if all you have is sight and then you jump to vision, many times, most of the times, you become what we call disillusioned. For example, I mean, after the last election, Peter Obi lost. It was very emotional for a lot of Nigerians, especially the young ones. I for one, I voted for Peter Obi. I came out. I don't know if I should have said that. Well, I voted for Peter Obi anyways. And I came out, I was at the polling unit till past midnight. Okay. I stayed there, we waited, we made sure the votes were counted. We stayed at our polling units while some other polling units were rigged and all of that. We stood our ground, really. The polling units resisted even military men from getting close to the ballot box. That's how that polling unit I was really die hard on that. I came out and supported Peter Obi to the extent that I did. Not because I 100% thought that Peter Obi was going to win. I believed he was going to win. But understanding how the Nigerian political system works, understanding the structures we have in place currently and where the persons in those structures move, I knew that it was very possible, most likely the case that Peter Obi was not going to win. But it was very important still that will still come out and cast those votes. So when essentially he lost, he went to the courts, there was still some hope that, okay, let's see how things are going to turn out. But when all of those happened, and of course, the emerged president, hope was not lost. There was no disillusionment because I already knew this. I already understood that this is how things, that this is currently how things work. It's not how it's going to work forever. Things can change, and there's a path to which things can change. Okay, and that is one of the reasons why I mean, talking about politics, it's one of the reasons why I would say every young parent should listen to persons like Dele Farotimi. Okay, you listen to persons like Dele Farotimi. I think it gets down to um the roots sometimes of how things can actually change. Okay, a lot of electoral reforms need to happen, and that's really where the fight needs to start from, amongst other things. But the point is, you know, if you don't know how things work, it is very easy for you to feel crushed. Confusion, a confused state is not a good state to be in. The best time for you to know how things work is when you are not under pressure. You take your time, find out how things work, you know how things work, you know how to manipulate the system if you need to manipulate the system to make things work. Okay? And when I say manipulate the system, in a not merely for personal gains. When I say manipulate the system to make things better, okay, that's what I'm talking about. To make things better. So, sights, insights, vision. You need to see, you need to understand the full context of what you are seeing. There are stage actors on the stage that are acting a movie. There is a producer behind the stage that is directing the movie. Okay, there's an executive producer, a director, behind the scene. There is someone who is sponsoring the whole movie. Okay, that the executive producer answers to. And there is an ideology that is making this person says, I'm going to put my money into the production of this movie. You need to understand all the stages of these things to understand how what you are seeing in front of you has come in front of you. You know, for example, Nigerians talk a lot about Nigerians and conservatives. We talk a lot about Netflix and some of the things that are happening with Netflix and how they are uncomfortable with it. And I asked one of them, "What are you going to do about it? What do you think is the solution? What do you think is the solution? You can tell yourself that you're going to leave Netflix, but you and I know that in 2025, that's a bit of a difficult decision to make. You might leave Netflix, but you find yourself somewhere else watching movies somewhere else. And, you know, media has become a very infused part of our lifestyle. It's very difficult, you know. If you are not going to do it yourself, one place I see that parents now flop is, of course, when the children come in, it's difficult to come back from work, you're tired, you just want to rest, the children want to have some fun. Just give them some phone, also a tab or a television, just go and watch movies. Just go. And so it's going to come back. So if you understand how things work, you realize that the counter to something like some of the quote unquote wokeness we see on Netflix, the counter to it is not to leave Netflix. The counter to it is to produce. You have to produce your own show. You have to produce your own show that is going to be just as interesting, if not more interesting. It's capitalism. That is the underlying structure that is powering Netflix now. It's capitalism. Okay. And then there are agendas. There are persons who have coalitions. Okay. And those coalitions lobby for certain kind of narratives to show up in movies. You have to know that is how things work. So if you want to counter those, you don't counter it by tweeting. You counter it by forming your own coalition that will lobby for certain things, that will pressure for certain things, that will move for certain things to be represented in media. Okay. And so this is so far as I'll take it today. I think we've had a long conversation on this. This is as far as I'll take it. So uh is faith just wishful thinking? No, it's not just wishful thinking. Hope is not just wishful thinking. Reality is not static. We can shape reality. We can shift reality. And we do this by understanding that what we are seeing is not all there is. There is something happening that's empowering what we are seeing. There's an insight. And then we also understand that the future has not been written. What we envision, what we hope for, is what we are going to work towards, is what we're going to plan our efforts towards this, what we're going to do. Social trust increases innovation, increases taxation. And I have to say that optimistic outlook to life allows you to be able to see opportunities where there aren't opportunities, where other persons don't see opportunities. Okay, I talked about origins of Celtel, where other persons saw uh, a group of people, bunch of Africans across the continents that can't afford. He saw a bunch of Africans across the continents that needed to, that wanted to, that longs to. And if you could find a way to make this thing possible for them, they will flock around you. And that's what he did. Okay. That's what he did. Piggy Vest saw that Nigerians wanted to save, so much so that they were ready to save 300,000, 500,000 inside a box. If they are ready to do that, then we can create a digital solution in 2015 that can solve that. Yeah, I mean, you can complain about all the problems with making transfers and not seeing alert and this one. And that's why Money Points came into the market and said, what? Let us solve the problem of transfer. So your outlook to things will make you see opportunities where other persons see problems. And I think that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to draw the line. If you can solve problems, then you can rise. The rise of the African youth. I think that's where I'm going to draw the line for it.